This week's Parsha is Parshat Tezria, which recounts in incredible detail the processes of identifying and treating someone afflicted by tzara'at. Tzara'at is described as a skin disease, one that can affect your body, your clothing, or even the walls of your own home. Any case of tzara'at is brought to the Kohen Gadol for a thorough inspection. The Kohen Gadol determines if one is ritually pure enough to stay within the camp or must be isolated outside the camp until they are pure enough to re-enter. This parsha is rich in details about tzara'at, but seems to be missing one crucial factor. Why would someone contract tzara'at in the first place? Many of us are familiar with the notion that tzara'at is a punishment for speaking lashon hara, and indeed we see this throughout our rabbinic literature. The Midrash in Dvarim Rabbah connects the punishment of lashon hara to the incident that we see with Miriam in Parshat Bahalotcha, where Miriam is afflicted with tzara'at because she speaks lashon hara about Moshe. And indeed, the Rambam backs this up in the Mishnah Torah, citing that tzara'at is not to be confused with any sort of normal skin disease, but it is specifically a divine punishment designed to isolate someone from among the community so that they cannot speak lashon hara anymore. But is this all there really is to tzara'at? I'd like to share with you an anecdote that happened in one of my 10th grade Tanakh classes recently to help us dig through deeper what tzara'at is really about. In our discussion of Divrei Hayamim Bet, we encountered Melech Uziyahu, Melech Yehuda, who contracts tzara'at in his attempt to be bringing a ketoret, a incense offering in the Beit HaMikdash. When Uziyahu is confronted by the Kohanim and refuses to stop what he is doing, there is an outbreak of tzara'at that comes about his forehead. And one of my students raised her hand and she asked, "Ms. Cooper, I don't get it. Doesn't someone get tzara'at simply for speaking lashon hara? Why would Uziyahu get tzara'at if he didn't say anything bad about anybody?" And in truth, she was absolutely right. Uziyahu did not seem to say anything bad about anyone, and here he was getting tzara'at. And I think in order to answer her question, we really have to get to the core of what tzara'at is all about. Yes, in many ways, tzara'at is about speech. But in reality, it is an expression of selfishness. In the moment that one is speaking lashon hara, one is not thinking about the damaging and hurtful consequences that his or her words can have on somebody else. Instead, I'd like to believe that if one really was thinking about those things, we would never speak lashon hara at all. Instead, I often believe that one speaks lashon hara for selfish purposes, whether that's to cover up an insecurity, feel like he or she is part of a group, or simply be someone with something interesting to say. Lashon hara is all about prioritizing oneself above the dignity and respect of someone else. And if we connect this to the idea of Uziyahu for a second, they really are one and the same. Just like lashon hara is about prioritizing your own needs and what you want out of that conversation, so too, Uziyahu in that moment is acting selfishly on his own desire to exhibit power over the Kohanim and needs a wake-up call. The message is clear. If you can't prioritize the dignity and respect of your fellow human beings above yourself, you can't be in the community. You must be isolated, at least on a temporary basis. So what do we do with this? How can we feel optimistic about our human tendencies and not bogged down by our flaws, leaving this parsha and moving into the rest of our week? In addition to reading Parshat Tezria this week, we also read Parshat HaChodesh, which is the last of the 4 special parshiot leading up to Pesach. Parshat HaChodesh describes in detail the ritual of bringing the Korban Pesach. And in contrast to Tazria that talks about tzara'at, Parshat HaChodesh focuses exclusively on a communal and positive mitzvah designed to bring people together. We learn in the text of Parshat HaChodesh that if one is bringing a korban, it is to be consumed as a household, among people. And if one's household has too few members in it, one should invite people into his or her home in order to celebrate and consume the Korban Pesach together. But I think that one of the most beautiful ideas that emerges from the Korban Pesach is the idea of the notar, of the prohibition of leaving anything to the morning to be consumed later on. What's so special about the notar, about not leaving anything over? It's the idea that if we have too few people in our home, even with our closest family, even with our friends, we are then compelled to bring needy people into our home bring members of the community into our space because nothing can be left over to the morning anyway. If tzara'at is the expression of the ultimate selfishness, Korban Pesach is an expression of selflessness. As we enter Shabbat, I bless us all with the ability to model our behavior after the mitzvah of the Korban Pesach and to distance ourselves from the damaging behaviors alluded to in Parshat Tezriah. I challenge us to think about how we can bring each other into community instead of distancing ourselves through selfish needs and harmful speech. And I wish us all a Shabbat Shalom Umvarach.